Now join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keep palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Good to see you guys here. For all of our millions of YouTube followers, those of you who showed up expecting Alex to lead the loving kindness practice, unfortunately, you're stuck with me. And as I always tell people, hang on. Once in a while, I fill in and I lead the loving kindness, and my comment usually is that I'm not loving or kind, but we're going to have to make do with it. So good luck. I'll be closing my eyes in a moment, so you'll be free to run and escape if you'd like. And Alex, my apologies for filling in for you. I don't usually also monitor the YouTube when I lead, but Alex is much nicer than I am, so I'll do my best here to follow you all here online as we're reopening again. It's a pretty crazy time right now with everything that's going on, and I think for me, this practice of metta, of loving kindness, most importantly, not just now, but really always, is to understand that the loving kindness must begin with yourself. And it's something I've found over the years with practice within my own space, as well as others that I sit with, is that's often the most difficult person that people tend to have loving kindness for. And again, I found in my experience with this that people who come to Buddhist practice come to it with challenges, difficulties, struggles in their lives. And we're human. That's what's going on. And very often people turn to Buddhist practice almost as if it's an escape, right? There's a lot of things that one can turn to. There's addictions, there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's exercising, there's all kinds of things that we can turn to really cope with the difficulties we have on a day-to-day basis. And Buddhist practice often becomes one of those things. Now, it's in most cases healthier than other addictions that we might turn to. But in all of these moments of turning towards something to find a sense of peace and happiness in your life, what is often being overlooked, or in many cases just completely neglected, is taking care of yourself. And very often, I also think, especially for those who are new to Buddhism, someone opens up a book on Buddhist practice, they read a book on no self, and all of a sudden they've combined the practice of generosity and the practice of no self, and people forget that there is this physical body, there are these emotions, there is this interaction that we have in the world, that if we don't pay attention to it and we just try to pretend that we don't exist, you're going to really struggle with that. And for me, without getting into it too much right now, but this teaching and idea of Buddhist practice on non-self is to understand that it doesn't mean you don't exist. It just means that you exist completely differently from how you perceive yourself to exist. And that the self is not permanent, it is forever changing. And so if it is forever changing, we have to recognize, what is it that is changing? It's our perceptions, it's our volitions, our actions, it's our pride, our ego. It is the cutting away of everything that keeps us from awakening. That's what's constantly changing. And all of those things are what we call the self. They are the personalities and the egos that we've built up over the years. So I think it's really important that when we look at having loving kindness and compassion in the world, that you really begin with yourself. And for me as a Zen practitioner, and there's a great Zen teaching that says you must get to know the self before you can get rid of the self. So for all of you, who've been around Buddhist practice for a while, please don't ignore what is that self? What is that essence that potentially we're running away from? And can we hold up a mirror and really look at that and shine a light on the fact that we as individuals deserve as much loving kindness as everybody else? So don't neglect that part. And for all of you, again, who are online here, good to see you all. Feel free to, it's a little bit hard for me to see the screen from where I'm at, but feel free to chime in, say hello, introduce yourselves. I know Alex is always really good and nice with that stuff. He always has you all tell your names and things like that, but you're stuck with the mean old guy leading tonight. So, but good to see you all online here. So feel free to chime in and chat with each other. We're going to start with the meditation practice. Again, for me, I'll lead differently from how I typically lead, wanting to keep the theme of loving kindness going tonight. So, but a couple just basics for those who might be new to practice. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You need to ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. So posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on the cushion, it helps. Slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever is comfortable. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means your leg hurts. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And for me, I'm just more comfortable wearing this. So. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, you'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the heart. Just begin to visualize, imagine the heart in any way that's comfortable. Full awareness of the breath. Imagine the heart beating slowly. Begin to imagine loved ones, friends, family, those close to you. Holding them in your heart as you breathe. observing the thoughts of these people, the memories, the joy, the happiness they brought to your life. Now imagine the heart expanding. See it beginning to open. Focus on those you miss. Maybe those who are no longer with us. Holding them in your heart as well. Now imagine the heart getting larger, expanding. Thinking of those who you may not know, the strangers who are suffering, those who sleep on the streets, those who face tremendous trauma, conflict. Those you cannot see or hear. Yet you know their pain. Hold them in your heart as well. Now imagine the heart getting larger, expanding even more. Now thinking of those you dislike, maybe those that have caused you harm. Those that have brought you suffering. Opening your heart to them as well. Now imagine those you dislike, that you may not know. Those you may see or hear bringing pain to others. Opening your heart to them as well. Expanding the heart as much as you need. Opening the heart once again, even larger. Imagine yourself as a child. Holding that child in your heart. Imagine yourself as you age, getting older. holding yourself in the heart as well. Opening the heart once again. Becoming aware of yourself as you are now. Continuing to hold yourself in your heart. And now with the heart as large as it needs to be, with all your friends, family, loved ones, the animals, of course, as well. Those you dislike, the strangers you know and love, those who've caused you pain, and you as you are, from the past to the present to the future, all just sitting. Imagine your heart getting smaller, holding all of these people, all of these animals inside your heart. Every experience, all the pain and suffering, all the joy and happiness, the heart continues to get smaller. Bringing the heart back to where you started. Beginning to understand and feel the pain and suffering of others as you sit and breathe. Sending endless loving kindness to yourself, sending endless loving kindness to all who sit in your heart at this moment. May they all be well and happy. May you be well and happy. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Just paying attention to how you feel at this moment. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. Pull that up. And most important with the practice is to recognize however you feel now. It's quiet, still, calm, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with. It's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's simply you, your mind, your reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was no different than any one of us. He began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. Every moment of our lives, things happen. We react. More stuff happens. More reactions. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, which is where you spend so much of your time hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. When you work on changing your mind and your reaction to the world around you, life gets simpler. And so much of that comes from the practice of loving kindness. Without loving kindness for yourself, it's going to be very difficult to have loving kindness for anyone else. There's an awareness of why we suffer that must occur. It's where it starts. To deeply explore where in our lives that we lack loving kindness. To deeply explore where in our lives we judge and critique and blame others. To deeply explore why we hold others accountable for so many things that we may not be willing to do ourselves. Why we blame others for things when we have just as easily done the same. The Buddha's teaching on anger, it's one of what's called the three poisons in Buddhist practice. Four Noble Truths. The first one is life is filled with dukkha, suffering. The second noble truth is what's the cause? These are the three poisons, the greed, the anger, and the ignorance. We overcome greed with generosity. We overcome anger with compassion. We overcome ignorance with wisdom. So this practice of loving kindness, this is the compassion that one must have for self and others. Very often in our lives, we pick and choose who we want to like, who we want to spend time with, where we want to go. And we close off a lot of people, whether we know them or not. We carry a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration from the past. If you've made it this far in life, it's not been easy. And you've faced tremendous difficulties. And one of the hardest things for people to do is to actually be proud of themselves for how far they've come. And for me, again, even in just the brief meditation practice of loving kindness, for me, that's why it's important. When we open up the heart to the child that we were, to the person we are now, to the person that we may become, it's so important to have kindness, compassion, loving kindness, metta, for all stages of ourselves throughout our lives. And it's something that, unfortunately, too often people lack. So with that, I'll pause. For me, always, when I lead, is just really to prefer responding to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. I'd much rather prefer responding to that. And again, to our millions of YouTube followers, there's a chat box there on your screen as you've been using. Feel free to type in any questions, thoughts, and let me look at these, and I can respond to those as well. If anybody here has questions, I'll just turn it over to you for questions, and we'll use the rest of our brief time to explore. Oh, that's funny. I'm Abby Normal. Wonderful to see you again. I use your 5-minute meditation for kids with my clients, juvenile offenders, adult inmates. That's great. Yeah, I spent, 19 years doing meditation in prisons, juvenile and adults. It's a pretty phenomenal place to lead meditation practice. There's quite an environment there that's filled with anger and hostility, and a place that lacks tremendous loving kindness. And very often it's what led a lot of those individuals to be there, really a lack of that in their lives for many reasons, various reasons. But so I'm glad you're still leading and doing the script. So questions, let's see here. It's not uncommon that I get emotional during loving kindness meditation. Is this something I should lean into or try to keep it together and prevent a sob fest? It's a good question. And I think that, like many things, there's, Tina, there's not always necessarily a right or wrong way to do this practice. I think very often with meditation practice, depending upon which type as well, it's important to kind of experience what it's like to do one and what it's like to do the other. And so if, this practice makes you tremendously emotional, I think you want to honor that and recognize that vulnerability, that kind of authentic true self that just, and again, it's hard with so many virtual, but very often, leading these practices or doing these practices, and, I joke about not doing the loving kindness practice, but years ago, I used to lead these quite a bit. And it is something that you'll sit in a room and, you have 50 people there and everybody's crying. Because when you start to open up your hearts to, at the beginning, to those you know and love and friends and family, like that's all great. But then you start to really think about and hold in your heart those who've caused you pain, those who've, harmed you directly, those you just carry so much resentment and hatred and anger towards. And a lot of those people are people that you know and potentially loved at some point in time. And that's why the pain is so deep. So when you begin to open up to that, it causes the emotions to really just go crazy. And so I think to your question, as far as leaning into it, at times it's okay to just lean into it and to be with that. And then at times it's, maybe appropriate to say, okay, I've leaned into that enough, and now I'm just going to come back to the other parts of this practice. But, I'm very careful about suggesting that, that one way is right or wrong. During the meditation practice, I think, for me personally, but again, it's my biased view as more of a Zen practitioner, where the thoughts arise, you come back to the breath. The thoughts arise, you come back to the breath. Thoughts arise, you come back to the breath. But in this case, you're actually really running with the thoughts and creating the stories in your head. And that's where those emotions are really coming from. And so my suggestion is, regardless of which route you take, whether it's in that moment sitting with it and sobbing and breaking down and losing it, or whether you just observe it and come back to breath and move on, I think it's really important that you use that as I don't know if reminder is the right word, but as something to really deeply explore outside of meditation. So if during this practice, if things are coming up for you that are really causing tremendous emotional pain, then that's something to really look into, because that means you're carrying that with you quite a bit, right? I mean, if I'm sitting here and I'm leading you through this practice, or someone that you may not know is leading you through this practice, and it brings up tremendous pain, then that's something you want to explore. So pay attention to that. I don't know if that, as usual, I never really answer any questions, but hopefully that gives you more to think about. And if not, Tina, feel free to chime in. Other thoughts, questions, anything?
I guess I have a question. When something good happens, how do you balance appreciating it in the moment without overly attaching to it?
Yeah. So the question, just to repeat it so I understand it, and for everyone at home, wherever you are right now, your question, if I understand it, is when something good happens, how do you balance appreciating it and being in the moment without getting too carried away? Yeah, that's you said, I think, the word that I would have chosen in a response, which is a balance. So, the Buddhist teachings are pretty clear with regards to, say, for example, what's called, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bodhisattva Practice. And a Bodhisattva means enlightened being. So it's kind of in a Western context, it's an angel that vows to be reborn life after life, right? Or just think of it as somebody that's just helping people. That's your vow. And so this Bodhisattva practice, there's a very specific teaching on generosity, which I love. The word dana Pali translates to generosity. And the idea behind giving is that there's no attachment to the giver, there's no attachment to the receiver, and there's no attachment to the gift. So there's just this exchange, but you're not attaching your ego to it, right? Now, this is all much easier said than done, but I just want to lay it out in theory first, right? So, have you ever helped somebody? Yeah, it's not a trick question, right? You look like a nice guy. I'm sure you've helped somebody somewhere along the way, right? So you help someone. And when you help someone, how does that make you feel? Pretty good. Now, the practice, and lots of times, with all the service we've done, the idea behind helping people and feeling good, it's not that feeling good from helping people is bad or wrong. But there's a reason, I believe, that we feel good when we help people. And part of that is because it's not our typical way of doing things, right? I mean, even if I look at the way things have been set up here for years, it's like we have all these practices, and you'll have an hour a week of community service. So what that tells me in many ways is that we spend so much time focused on who? Ourselves. And then we carve out a little bit of time to do something for someone else, so it's different for us. And we feel good, right? All good reasons, all good things. I'm not suggesting that we stop. What I'm trying to point out, coming back to your question, is that it's important to understand why we become happy about something, or enjoy something, or excited about something, or feel good about something. And very often that's because it's so contrary to how we typically are. So again, that's a moment to recognize that as I go through my day and I'm wrapped up in judgments, likes and dislikes, duality is taught in Buddhism, that separates this from that. So ultimately, the practice is, and bear with me here because I'm not trying to make it sound miserable, right? But ultimately, the practice is not about making sure that you feel good and that you're happy, even though those things are important. It's about the intention of what you're doing. And that intention, if it's coming from a place of loving kindness and compassion, right? These intentions that come from our hearts bring good. And to your question of staying present, for me, again, just as a practitioner, what I've learned through this practice is not try to get wrapped up in enjoying. I forget what word you used, enjoying or liking. When you first asked your question, what word did you use? Do you remember? Appreciating. Okay, great. Really? That's the word you used? I don't think that's the word you used. Doesn't matter. We can rewind the film and look at it. But my point is, that's funny you said appreciating, because that's what I was going to say. I thought my memory says you initially said like good or happy or something like that. And for me, this practice is not about making sure each moment is good, but appreciating each moment. So that's, to me, where, and I don't like to look at like practice as evolving so much, but I think that it is important that with time we evolve in the way we observe present moment. You know, like a little kid gets a toy and they're like so happy. But then the toy's gone and then we need another toy. And then the toy's gone, then we need another toy. So it's that constant craving and desire that the Buddha said leads to suffering. Where observing and appreciating is very different. And if you appreciate each moment, then beautiful. But what that means is each moment isn't always going to be what?
It's not permanent, so it's just temporary.
It's temporary. And each moment might not be pleasant. So the practice is, can we appreciate present moment that is unpleasant? And one way we do that, which you just said, is looking at the Buddhist teachings on impermanence, is to understand that that present moment is temporary. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
It helps us appreciate each moment. And I think if we appreciate each moment, then it keeps us away from these, which is kind of what I felt with your initial question, is that it keeps us away from these like constant highs and lows. You know, the big rush to everything's great, and then we just crash. And then we're constant rush, and then we crash. Appreciation of present moment allows us to just observe and be with it all as it occurs. And I think that's a really beautiful place to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Given that life is suffering caused by desire, I find myself wanting to not want, and I get trapped in that dilemma. Does the Buddha have teachings to help with that?
Yeah, so the question was, for those who didn't hear it, is this idea very often that when people begin to learn Buddhist practice, you know, you read a few things and it says life is suffering, suffering is caused by desire, I want to end suffering, that's a desire, and then I'm trapped.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to untrap you very easily.
Please.
There are unhealthy desires, as taught by the Buddha. Pull that up, please, thanks. And there are healthy desires. A healthy desire is to want to end suffering. So But forget about the Buddhist suffering and ending suffering for a minute, and just back up to your day.
Yeah.
Every day you have so many choices that you can make. Many of them are driven from a place of kindness, compassion, right? And many of them are driven from a place of greed, anger. Our choices throughout the day are either about us or about others. So when we begin to explore the craving and desire, because believe me, all of us have cravings and desires separate from this like endless desire to end suffering. That's the least of your problems right now, man. Right? Trying to figure out how to end suffering is a beautiful craving to have. But what it should hopefully allow you to practice is to recognize in the rest of your life, what else are you craving and desiring that is causing suffering? We often skip all of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's really what the practice is.
So it's like delineating between healthy and unhealthy desires.
It is delineating between healthy and unhealthy desires. The problem with that, pull that up, please, is you, and don't take offense by this, so let me just say this. Me, as the unenlightened fool, am using my unenlightened mind to try to delineate between healthy and unhealthy. How is the ignorant, unenlightened guy going to know what is actually healthy and what is unhealthy? You ever good at justifying things?
Yeah.
You ever good at making excuses for things? You ever convinced that you're right? That's the challenge. So it requires time, it requires patience, it requires a lot of practice to begin to say what is healthy and what is unhealthy. Because if we just kind of roam aimlessly throughout our day and we start picking and choosing what we say is healthy and unhealthy, it's going to be very difficult. So, but keep the craving, keep the desire to end suffering. But my guess is with most people, it's pretty easy throughout our day to recognize healthy and unhealthy. We could spend a couple of years just looking at the common everyday things we do that are healthy and unhealthy. Especially when you're new to Buddhism, forget this whole am I going to be enlightened by Tuesday of next week, right? Forget this idea of when am I going to awaken or when am I going to end suffering? For me, the practice is about focusing on, can I suffer less today than I did yesterday? Can I make wiser choices today than I did yesterday? Start there, because there's enough in most people's lives that you don't need some genius to point out to you, the foolish things or choices that we're doing. A lot of them are pretty obvious. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see if there's anything else here, and then I'm going to wrap up. Tina, you're welcome. Tina, it is good. Oscar. Okay. Yeah, so it says, I recently needed to tell my landlord about my neighbor that was being loud at night. I didn't like it, but I'm not the type of person who confronts others. The noise was disrupting my rest. I'm glad I told my landlord, however, my neighbor is now quiet. So problem solved, Oscar. Made that one easy for me. I appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to close on that. And we'll go ahead. We'll do a transfer of merit. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to nearly 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and their family and friends who continue to suffer at this day. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. All right, just a few quick announcements before you all head out or offline. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense. Every night we have different practices going on. As most of you know, we shut down for 16 months, March 12th, 2020. We opened up July of 2021. We were able to be open for 6 months, and then we closed again for about 2.5 months, and we just opened, 2-3 days ago. So it's nice to be open again, to be back in person, to sit with, actual human beings is cool. I do love this temple when it's empty, but I also love it more when there's people here. So I appreciate y'all being here and sitting. Obviously, for those of you who stay virtual, we'll continue to do almost all of our classes, at least the ones during the week, we'll continue to stream. For those who either, still just don't want to come around people, which I understand, or are just more comfortable at home, we'll keep streaming them. Ken does the Monday night Zen practice. I do the intro class on Tuesday. Alex typically does the loving kindness here on Wednesdays. Travis does the Dharma Bum Basics on Thursdays, and I do the class on Saturday. We also have a Tonglen practice Sunday nights, and then every morning, Monday through Friday, 8 and 8:30, we do a silent sit. So the temple is open again for that. Same thing as before, temple opens for 8 and 8:30, and then it closes at 9 o'clock, and then it opens up again in the evening for class. We're still doing everything masks are 100% required. Seating still socially distanced, and so we're doing our best because we know a lot of people that show up here, they come here because they know that we're being as careful and cautious as possible. So we really, we appreciate all of you doing that. So thanks to all of you out in YouTube land, and appreciate you guys being here. So we'll see you soon. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.